Welcome back to the channel. This game is another game from the Petrosian Memorial, and in fact the last decisive game that Nigel played in the tournament. He played the Grandmaster Valentin Lukov from Bulgaria. The game started as Sicilian defence. And into the Shevenigan attack with Shevenigan variation. And the Queen comes out to put pressure on the A8 rook. This is all standard stuff. Nigel goes for the ambitious pawn push on the king side. So black kicks the knight from c3 and brings his own knight out to threaten the e pawn and also the d3 bishop. This is a nice move, just defending the e pawn and putting more pressure on the f5 square and the white castles, and black tries to prevent the d5 push. Nigel decides to push anyway, which I think is a slight mistake. I think g5 would have been a better move in this position, kicking the knight. And then can probably push the f pawn. He decided to push the f pawn to start with, and decides to sack a knight for play. I mean, the knight on f6 looks very weak. And it's probably going to drop. And this is the idea behind the move: bishop to d4, pinning the knight on f6 and putting pressure on it. Obviously, black can defend the knight with bishop g7, which is probably the best move. But then after knight takes f5, white builds up quite a head of steam on the king side, and probably black's best option is to queenside castle. But Lukov decided to take the pawn on e4, going into complications, allowing queen takes f5, f6 even. So the rook moves out the way. And here Nigel plays a mistake. He decides to take the knight on c5, which kind of leads to quite a dodgy position for him. I think something like bishop to e2. And something like this would have been fine for white. Black's still slightly better, but white's doing perfectly fine, even though he's a pawn down. He's got enough compensation for it. But after bishop takes c5, it's not immediately obvious that white has got enough for the pawn. Obviously, certainly queen takes f7, check. But he needs to move his rook, his bishop first, and probably to e2 to defend. Or sorry, he's got to get out the check first. But after that, moving his bishop to e2 is probably the idea. So he does block the check, and black continues his development. And the idea behind it is if queen takes f7, then king to d7, and the king can run away. So knight to f5 puts more pressure on the bishop, and black must find a way to defend it. And he chooses queen to e5, which is actually a mistake. He can get away with taking the pawn on g4 after king f1 and defending with a rook on e8. Now queen to e5. is okay because everything's covered. The bishop now has to move, and which is g6 is an important move just to shore up the defence. And black keeps his extra pawn and his position's fine. The pin and the bishop's awkward, but he's not threatening. White's not threatening to break through, and black's quite compact, and will probably go on to win the game with the extra material and the dangerous e-pawn. We play queen to e5, allowing the bishop to come to e2 to defend the g pawn. So after e3, kicking the rook, Nigel plays rook to f4, which is a fairly good move in the fact that he's threatening the b pawn. Obviously, if queen takes rook, then white can start chasing the king around with a series of checks, which will ultimately lead to mate. And all this is actually forced. A very nice checkmate by the pawn in the end. So black can't take the rook, so he chooses just to attack the queen instead with the a rook. But now white can win the bishop through a nice tactic. And now once he's taken the bishop, if king takes knight in this position, then simply rook takes b4, and white's a pawn up, and black's lost quite all of his advantage, and white's actually doing quite well. But he didn't play, so black didn't play king takes knight. He took the rook f4, and white obviously recaptures on g8. So now white's won a piece, but black's going to get some pawns and still got quite a dangerous e-pawn. That's an important move to stop any knight, forcing the knight onto a bad square on h6. And now black can try and gobble some pawns up. This is a slight mistake from Nigel, as it allows e2. And this is probably the losing move for black. He was doing okay. He could easily just have taken the pawn on a2, and obviously if rook takes rook, then the e1 queen. And after this sort of variation, black's doing fine. He's got 3 pawns back for the. He's got 3 pawns. Sorry, he's got 2 pawns for the piece. But the dangerous e pawn's always going to be a danger, and he's now got a connected pass pawn with the d pawn as well. And if anything, he's probably got the advantage. But he played bishop to e4, which doesn't look like a bad move, but does allow white to get out of all of his problems. So king to g2 and d5. And this is quite an important move to swap the bishops off. And then black tries to come forward with his king, but this allows the white king to intercept it. And now black finally does take the pawn on a2, but white just simply sidesteps. And knight to d4 will pick up the dangerous e-pawn. And now black's only got 1 pawn for the knight, and white's got a winning material advantage. In this position, Lukov resigned. Quite an interesting game, topsy-turvy game. Quite complicated, and quite a lot going on in the middle game. So Nigel finished the tournament with a lot of draws and just the two decisive wins plus against one loss, which I think placed him about fourth in the tournament. But all a good learning curve, and his next games will be at the Olympiad, where even though he was British champion, he didn't play on a particularly high board. I think he was actually a reserve. So we'll cover some of those games in the next videos. So please like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. And until next time, bye for now. Cheers.